Recording in progress.
Happy Monday. Nice to see you guys. Appreciate the heck out of you being here. Let's get everybody in the room and then we'll start seated. So just a nice comfy seat. See if I can get my camera to participate. Let your breath make it all the way through you. Big, full inhales, nice, deep, complete exhales, really thinking about the completeness of our breath. Taking that opportunity to receive and offer with our breath in our fullest capacity. Keeping in mind that our desire here is to create a seat in which we can lose perception of the body. And so we want to be so aligned, integrated within the spinal column stack that the body itself becomes secondary to the experience. And give ourselves about 60 more seconds here. And when it feels appropriate, we can let the eyes blink open if they are closed. And let's take the left hand and place it behind us. So palm away from us, back of the hand to the sacrum. And so with that back of the hand, start to press into the sacrum and then roll that left shoulder back. And then we'll just take our right hand straight out in front of us. And we're going to roll the right palm up and then roll that right palm down. And you can do this nice and slow. And as the right arm is working through internal and external rotation, and you can take that into an exaggerated internal if that feels accessible, but just note how the left shoulder responds. Just a nice little awareness of our bilateral connection. And then we'll relax. Let that left shoulder settle in. Try to find a balance across the shoulder girdle, and then same thing to the second side. Right hand comes behind us, palm away, back of the hand, presses into the small of the back, left arm reaches straight forward. And then we're just going to go into these palm rotations. As you're rotating that palm, maintain that retraction of the humeral head. And then just try to feel how, particularly at end range, the tucked shoulder responds to this relatively simple request. And then eventually, when you feel balanced, we'll come back. We should have pretty decent shoulder capacity already. Hands come together at heart center. We're going to interlace the fingers and then press the arms straight up and overhead. Biceps coming by the ears here. You can squeeze those shoulders back ever so slightly. And relax. And let's transition to hands and knees tabletop. So you can come into this hands and knees tabletop. We really should feel how much we can ground in the top half of this shape and try to think about that. Soften the shoulder connection without softening the shoulder girdle. So looking for a deeper approximation of the shoulder joint, but still having that musculature turned on across the scapula. And let's keep that as we curl our toes and roll back into down dog. Allowing us to get some depth here. Depth that ideally is coming from the scapula down, right? So base of the scapula down towards that glute side. When it feels appropriate, let's come back down to hands and knees tabletop. We'll keep the hands anchored where they are and just sink back into child's pose. And so that by keeping the hands anchored, we maintain a little bit of shoulder activity as we press back. So as you're getting into the depth of this shape, try to think about where you're feeling the supportive musculature around the shoulder girdle. And then let's pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. Curl our toes, lift our seat, find our way all the way back into down dog. And then we'll walk our way forward into fold. Coming to the front of the mat, inhaling into half lift, getting that big expansion of the spinal column. Exhaling all the way back into fold. Letting your head settle all the way into that fold. Nice, Tony. Drift your awareness to your sacrum, and let's roll ourselves up vertebrae by vertebrae. Coming into this top space. Letting the hands come together at heart center in mountain. And then think about that shoulder space. Retract the shoulders back and try to get that posterior chain active. Like, we're not necessarily trying to take up slack, but we're activating the musculature in a way where we feel a response on the backside of the body. Then slide your left foot straight back into lunge. As you land here, we want that upper back to maintain the activity, and then hands are going to push straight up and overhead. As the arms come up and overhead, squeeze those shoulders back. And then relax the hands down to heart center. And we'll return to the front of the mat. Top of the shoulders relax. So really think about the distance between the bottom of the ears and the top of the shoulders maximizing. And then bring yourself into that retracted space so that we feel that posterior chain activation, particularly across the shoulder girdle. And then our right foot will slide straight back. We want to maintain that upper back activity, even through my blur. And then we'll push the arms up and overhead. Find your way into that top space. Squeeze those biceps by the ears and really think about how we can find that strength. And the hands drop to heart center and we step back into mountain. Key in mountain is we want the top of the shoulders to relax. So just think about relaxing down, maximizing that space, and then that sweep the arms up and overhead through all of that shoulder room. Give your wrists just a little bit of play here. And then we'll reverse that. And then when you feel complete, all the way through forward fold. Let the posterior chain respond to this fold. Let your body completely melt into this fold space. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. And then we'll plant our hands and walk our way into plank. Some shoulder activation here that may make plank feel a little bit more challenging than it normally does. Squeeze the core to help compensate, and then lower yourself down to your belly. Flip the tops of the feet. Pull the center of the hands up. So you can even feel the finger mounds lift away from the mat, but we're trying to create a little hollow space in our hands. And then with the quads flexed, we'll lift the forehead, maybe an inch, maybe 2 inches, but we're keeping the center of the hands lifted and trying to keep the energy in the fingertips relatively light as well. So this is very posterior chain active. And then relax, slide your hands underneath your forehead for crocodile pose, and let your body just receive this little quarter class check-in. Try to dial your breath back into the way we started class with that full capacity to receive and offer. Thinking about each cycle of breath, trying to clear as much of the previous half as possible. So that with the inhale, we're trying to completely fill the lung cavity. And with the exhale, we're trying to completely empty the lung cavity without overburdening our respiratory rate or overtaxing our heart rate. We'll give ourselves just 20 more seconds here. And then when it feels appropriate, we'll slide our hands back underneath our shoulders. We'll press ourselves up to hands and knees tabletop. From hands and knees tabletop, curling the toes, lifting the seat, finding our way back into down dog. Get that space, and then let's walk forward into fold. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Pedal all the way through that fold. Beautiful. Drift your awareness to your sacrum. We'll roll ourselves up vertebrae by vertebrae. Coming into mountain. For mountain, let's once again think about that little humeral head retraction so that we get the posterior chain activation. Then think about, with that retraction, also getting some width so that we're pulling the shoulders into some width, and let's slide our left foot straight back into lunge. Keep the hands pressing together, maybe just a little bit more intently, and then slide back into your right hamstring. So we straighten that right leg. At the same time, push into the left heel so that we feel that left high calf insertion. Sometimes even more than the hamstring, right? Depends on where your area of restriction is. And then we'll bend the front knee, slide forward, and find mountain once again. Breathe across the feet. And then when it feels appropriate, second side. Set your spine, right? So get that big activity in the shoulder, and then second side slides back. We land, we develop that stability, and then our left hamstring slides back, right heel drives back so that we get that full activity here. Think about where you're receiving the most restriction. And then eventually, when you feel balance, we'll bend the front knee and step forward. And refine mountain. Refine the balance in the shoulders, refine the balance in the hip girdle, sweep the arms up and overhead, and then exhale through forward fold. Let go completely in the fold, then inhale into half lift. And then exhale back into fold. Drift your awareness to your sacrum. And we'll roll ourselves up vertebrae by vertebrae. Nice and slow, thinking about how we can stack the spinal column. And then eventually we do. Hands come together at heart center. We'll slide our right foot straight back into lunge. Ground your right heel, roll into warrior two. And then take your hands to your sacrum, thumbs and index fingers coming together so that we craft this nice little diamond shape on the back side of our body. Then smoothing into that front quad, take yourself forward so that the elbow is on the lateral edge, that outside edge of the left thigh for side angle. Push into that pinky toe edge of your right foot, and then draw yourself back up into warrior two. Slide back into the left hamstring like triangle legs. And then instead of taking the triangle, just start to reach straight forward with that left hand as far as feels possible without dipping at all. So we're just going straight forward. And then we'll come right back up, bend that front knee, spin into crescent, drop the hands to heart center, and return to the front of the mat. Top of the shoulders relax. You have that left hamstring potentially biting, fighting here. Get the glutes active so that we find belt line stability. And then when you feel balanced, we'll take this to the second side. Left foot slides straight back. We're landing and stable. Then we ground the left heel and roll to two. Hands come behind us. Making that diamond on the sacrum area, index fingers and thumbs, keeping that space. When you feel ready, that right elbow comes down on the lateral edge, right side edge of your right thigh. We find that nice capacity. Push into the pinky toe edge. And then we draw ourselves back up. Find warrior two. And then straighten into the front leg. We are taking that right hand forward. So triangle energy without the drop here. We're really pushing forward and elongating. Keep that back arch active. Eventually, there's going to come a time when you feel balance left to right. When you do so, we'll bring ourselves back up to two. Spin the left heel up to crescent. Drop the hands to heart center. And return to the front of the mat. Nice work. Inhale, sweep your arms up and overhead. With the arms up and overhead, let's bring the hands together and then make index finger guns. And then we'll just squeeze that back. Squeeze the glutes here. And let the hip slide slightly forward. And then release this into forward fold. And so we go extension to flexion energy, not often held. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Plant your hands. We'll walk our way into down dog. Craft that length that you've offered the hamstrings. So make sure to drive all the way into that full elevation here. And then we'll come down to hands and knees, tabletop, flip the tops of the feet and sink into child's pose. Child's pose with some hamstring space, potentially some hamstring fatigue as well. Might not necessarily correspond with enough hip space to fully get into the shape. So think about what your choices you want to do. You can push with your hands to drive energy back. You can squeeze the core, or you can stay in a little bit forward centered shape, but something that allows for some hip compression here, kind of a blood flow rebalance. We'll give ourselves just a few more breath cycles here. One more big full inhale. One more full complete exhale. Emptying the lungs. And then we'll engage our fingertips into the mat in front of us if they're not already. We'll pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. And from hands and knees tabletop, let's curl our toes, lift our seat, and find our way back into down dog. And slowly walk our way forward into fold. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Let that mid back relax. Drift your awareness to your sacrum. And let's roll ourselves up vertebrae by vertebrae. Coming into a little mountain here. Let's take a moment just to balance the weight between the feet. And then once you get the weight balanced, take our right knee up into half Karate Kid, and we'll take that right ankle across our left thigh. So now we have an asymmetrical balance. We'll bring the hands together to help squeeze that stability in line, and then sink your way back into chair, really making sure, I did pull my pants over there, really making sure that the seat's going back, that we're not leaning forward into this. So really drive that seat back and think about the hips. We have hamstring fatigue, which is making this much harder than it normally would be. And then we'll rise back up, find our half Karate Kid. From that, just extend your left leg or your right leg forward, and then release that straight down. Now, really easy to have some asymmetry in the way that we sit. So squeeze into the glutes and get that belt line level. And then let's make sure we're balanced once again. And then we'll head to our second side. Finding that lift. And then across. And then finding your way into chair, driving the hips back. Make sure that the weight settles back. The hamstring doesn't want to go there, but it's almost like you need to sit back enough until the glute max turns on, that low glute musculature. And once you feel that turn on, then we know, okay, now we're using the depth of the shape. And then when it feels appropriate, when you feel balanced, we'll lift back up, extend that left leg in front of us, release that. Straight down, sweep your arms up and overhead. And then exhale through forward fold. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Let your body relax all the way into the fold. Let the hamstrings kind of take on the burden, almost like you want the torso to shift some stability responsibility into the hamstrings. And the hamstrings are just fighting against the desire to take on that burden. And then let's roll ourselves up vertebrae by vertebrae again. Bringing the hands together at heart center. We'll slide our left foot straight back into lunge. Ground our left heel. Roll open into warrior two. Slide back into your right hamstring. A more traditional, a very traditional triangle here. About as traditional as we can get. Think about that stack of the arm structure. Think about the activity in the arches. That lateral side on that top side, left side, elongating. And then let's take our left hand and extend it towards the front of your room just to try to get some last little bit of elongation out of that lateral edge. And then we'll bend the front knee and roll up into two. Settle there. Drop the left hand to your quad. Turn the right palm up. Point the right fingertip straight up. Straight up is the key, and then we're dropping down and maintaining that straight extension. So now we're getting some right side lateral expansion to mirror or to match what we just did on the left. And then we'll come back into two with a lot of torso room. Spin the left heel up, come into crescent. Drop the hands to heart center. And return to the front of the mat. Now, the relaxation of the shoulders should be relatively easy here. The one little challenge is we may have some imbalance in intercostal space. So that shoulder retraction that we've been working on can help just kind of pull everything into alignment. So think about that pulling of the rib musculature, that intercostal musculature between the ribs, really getting integrated. And then once you feel integrated, bringing the hands together at heart center. If they're not already, we'll slide that second side, the right foot, straight back into lunge. Ground our right heel and roll open into two. Slide back into that left hamstring. And we're headed straight down into this traditional version of triangle. Really thinking about how we can find this top side, right side torso expansion right now. Eventually, when you feel ready, right hand reaches towards the front of your space, pulling even more of that lateral line into length, getting that depth. And then we'll come up into two. From two, right hand drops to the quad, lateral edge of the quad. Left palm turns up, left fingertips reach straight up towards the ceiling. And then we slide our way back here. As we're headed into that depth, it's more about the top hand here, right? So the back hand is just working to an anchor point, and then the left fingertip in this case is reaching into expansiveness. When you feel balance left to right, we'll bend that front knee, come back into spin the right heel up. We'll come into crescent, drop the hands to heart center. And return to the front of the mat. Now, there's a real potential for some hamstring fatigue. Think about just breathing into the full stability of your shape. And then we're going to sink back into a traditional chair. Traditional chair where now the hips want to fight us, the hamstrings want to fight us, the quads want to fight us. So we're getting back into that hip space. Then just push through your hamstrings and drop into forward fold. And drop all the way into that fold space. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Plant your hands and we'll walk into plank. Squeeze the glutes for the stability here. Lower yourself down to your belly. Flip the tops of the feet. Suck up the middle of the hands once again, so finger mounds can lift. The center of the palm lifts. Fingerprints are active, and then we'll find our way into a little baby cobra. Baby cobra with a height of your choice. That being said, the torso may be way more fatigued than you expect. And so if it feels like 4 inches feels like you're lifting 4,000 pounds, then choose a baby cobra that really is more free in your ability to breathe. And then let's relax, slide our hands underneath our forehead for crocodile pose. And we settle back into full respiration. Full inhales, full exhales that fully empty and fully fill the lungs. And so out in the Sonoran Desert, there's this aging and feeble coyote. And it's been kind of wandering around looking for nourishment for what seems like way too long. Let's give ourselves about 20 more seconds here. When it comes across this huge patch of prickly pear cactus, all just through bloom and into fruiting, when you're ready, let's slide our hands underneath our shoulders. We will press ourselves up to hands and knees, tabletop. Curl the toes. Lift the seat and find your way back into down dog. And then shift forward into plank. And then lift the seat back into down dog. And shift forward into plank. And lift the seat back into down dog. And then walk your way forward into fold. Inhaling into half lift. And exhaling back into fold. Take your right hand over to your left foot. This can be your left toe mound or your left heel. It can be your left ankle. It could be your left shin. Just depends on what feels like the appropriate grip here. And then we're going to take our left hand to our hip and take a nice little twist. Left shoulder kind of leading the way in the twist here. Think about keeping that lateral length So drive the head out as you rotate and then relax back into your fold. Settle all the way into that fold and really feel the twist unwind. Yeah. Nice, Lisa. And then we head to side two. Left hand comes to the right foot, heel, ankle, shin, whatever feels appropriate. Right hand comes to the hip, and then we rotate from this offset fold. Right shoulder more or less leads the way. At the same time, we drive that length and expansion. Looking for some oblique length here, really. Whenever it is that you feel balance left to right, we'll release back and settle into the fold, thinking about unwinding that twist. Drift your awareness to your sacrum, and we'll roll ourselves up vertebrae by vertebrae. Coming into our top mountain shape, hands coming together at heart center. Settle. When it feels appropriate, we are going to slide our left foot straight back into lunge. Set the spine in the same way we've been working on. So humerus retracts. We get that activity across the back side of the body. Smooth into that front quad just a little bit deeper than we have been. We should have some more space. And then reach the arms straight up, full expression of crescent. And this is it. Just a full activity of crescent here. Hands drop to heart center. When we step back to the front of the mat. Engage the glutes. Find that bilateral equivalency. And from that, side two, right foot slides straight back. Set the shoulders, get that upper back activation. Smooth into that front quad, and then fully express crescent. And then eventually, we'll drop the hands to heart center and return to the front of the mat. Sweep your arms up and overhead. Exhale through forward fold. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Plant your hands. We'll walk back into down dog. Come down to hands and knees tabletop. Flip the tops of the feet, sink back into child's pose. Land there. See if you can get a little bit of extra depth. And so, with this coyote being so malnourished, he sees all of these prickly pear cactus fruits, and while it's not his favorite food, kind of loses it. He goes into this patch and he just starts biting at these fruits, and they're like exploding in his mouth, and the juice is dripping on him and it's splashing. And 15 minutes or so later, he feels nourished. And he looks down at his front paws, and they're covered in prickly pear juice. And he's been like stained purple. His head is stained purple, paws are stained purple. His whole like upper half of his body is stained with this prickly pear juice. When you're ready, Let's pull ourselves forward to hands and knees. Tabletop, we'll extend the legs straight out into staff. And we'll follow that leg extension into a seated forward fold. And so he's kind of chuckling to himself at how he's this neon pink. And almost as that thought hits him, out of the corner of his eye, he sees this huge movement. And he turns and he focuses, and it is an entire pack rat colony making its way back from a day of foraging. And they're all going into this little pack rat cave. And it's a huge colony. There are thousands of pack rats, it seems. It's just like this line that goes on and on and on and on as they file in. And he thinks how wonderful it would be to have the opportunity to consume a pack rat, those plump little bellies. And then he looks down and he thinks, well, it's going to be hard to sneak up on a pack rat when you're dyed neon pink. And so he just watches and observes as they all go in at sunset. Last 10 seconds here. And when it feels appropriate, coming back up to vertical and heading onto our spine for what should be a real good moment of appreciation. The torso work we did was pretty extensive. And so as you settle here, try to feel the length from the belt line up. And the coyote goes to sleep right next to the pack rat den. And he wakes up before sunset. And he gets up on his back legs, so his front paws are floating in the air. And he opens his mouth and he tilts his head up slightly towards the sky. And he waits. And also, before I forget, this is a remix of an old yogic story. The story is not mine. When it feels appropriate, as it feels appropriate, let's bring our knees into a bent position. And then we'll start to sway the knees side to side. Just a little dynamic flow here. And now each time that you make it to the full apex of a twist, so when that lateral edge of the down thigh is as low as it's going to get, whether that's against the floor mat or not, start to push your shins towards the front of your space. Like you're trying to continue this cycle of elongation and then bring yourself back to neutral and then to the other side. And when you get to the other side, the same thing. It's like you're trying to push the legs forward towards the front of your mat and then just reverse to the other side. So we'll do that a couple more times on each side, really taking the time to drive that length forward. And then eventually, when you feel like you're balanced and complete, we'll bring the knees back to neutral. Let the bottoms of the feet come together and let the knees fall out wide. And so that the entirety of the body can be at ease. If it works for your geometry, it does not work for everyone's geometry, right? We're all going to have different torso geometry, different arm geometry. But if it works for your geometry, you can take the thumb index finger kind of U and place that at the top of the hips and try to push the legs away from the torso to continue this elongation streak that we're on. And we'll give ourselves just about 40 more seconds here. And so in the morning, or when the sun starts to come up later in the morning, the pack rats get ready to run out of this cave and go start their forage. And like they do every morning, they send a scout out just to kind of observe and report back. When it feels appropriate, as it feels appropriate, we'll bring our knees back to neutral. Let the heels walk out to the width of the mat. So toe mounds and heels out to the width of the mat and let the knees fall in towards one another. This is going to be a super brief stay here, but just one kind of opportunity to realign with the aid of gravity all of the spinal column space we've offered. Last 30 seconds here. So the scout goes out and he sees this coyote. And it looks statuesque. It's so still. Its mouth is open. You can see these big sharp teeth, and it's up on its back legs so that the front legs are resting in the air. And this brave scout kind of walks over and sees that the coyote's breathing, but it doesn't move. And so it pokes the coyote in the foot. And the coyote very slowly looks down and greets this pack rat. When you're right, when you're ready. Let's bring our knees back out to the width of the mat and then walk our feet back in line with our hips. Knees follow. And then just ask yourself if there's anything you might want, need, or benefit from prior to Shavasana. And if there is, let's offer that to ourselves now. And if you have everything you need, let's just find ourselves a shape where we can appreciate some stillness. And so the coyote looks down, greets this pack rat, and the pack rat kind of quakingly says hello back. The coyote senses this fear and says, "Oh, little pack rat, you have nothing to fear. I'm here to take care of you. I've been sent from above to watch over your whole community." And the rat says, "Well, you have pretty sharp teeth. Aren't you going to use those to eat us?" And the coyote laughs and says, "Oh, no. I'm an aeritarian. That's why I have my mouth open. All I consume is air." And skeptically, the rat looks back at the coyote. "Okay, well, why are you standing on your back feet?" Coyote says, "Like I said, I've been sent from above. I'm not an earthly being. And so if I were to put the weight of all four of my paws on the earth, it would crumble beneath me. And so I do this to protect you. I stand on my back legs to protect you." And so the scout kind of thinks, he's like, "Well, the coyote hasn't eaten me yet, and that's atypical of coyote behavior." He runs back inside. He tells the rest of the community that they've been sent a being from above. He's going to look over them. The pack rats rush out of the cave with enthusiasm and go about their day. When it feels appropriate for you to settle in, let's settle in completely to some stillness. That evening, when the pack rats come back before sunset, they come back with pride because they have this new being watching over them. This neon pink coyote standing on its back legs with its mouth open. One by one, they rush into the cave until the very last rat. And as the very last rat tries to scramble in, the coyote comes down off of its back legs, lands on all fours, snatches the rat up, and swallows it before anyone even notices. We'll start to bring some movement into our fingers and our toes. And so, day after day, as the rats come back at sunset, movement into the wrists and the ankles, the same thing happens. The very last rat, snatched up before anyone notices, swallowed. Movement into your elbows and your knees. Some time later, the rats look around and there's more room, more space, less rats. Movement into your shoulders and your hips, your neck and your head. Your jaw and your eyes and your tongue. Eventually, we'll bring enough movement in our body that we can transition from the shapes we are in back into a seat. And noticing that there's less of them, the king of this pack rat community stays back one day. And he observes as the rats come filing in at night, and he sees this fuchsia coyote jump down, eat the last rat. And he knows at that point that they've been had. With your next inhale, let's bring our hands together, heart center. Over the next lifetime of experience, can you remember that true enlightenment is not shown in the hue of one's fur or the promise of one's words, but instead of in the honesty of their actions? And see how that impacts your experience. Thank you so much for being a part of this evening's practice and for being you. Namaste. Happy Monday, guys. Appreciate the heck out of you. Have such a beautiful evening. I'll be back on Sunday to recharge, and we'll do this again next Monday. Have a beautiful week. Love you. Mwah!